Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Making Stuff with Mr. Hoon. As you can see, this is the first phase of our capstone project in Introduction to Art. We're bringing together all of, if not most of, the drawing techniques that we've explored throughout the course of the 2 semesters we've been together. And occasionally, periodically, I'll slow down and I'll talk about some of the ideas that I want you to remember as you bring those ideas beyond into upper division art courses if you so choose to take them. So here we have in our drawing of the imagination a representation of an object, a couple of objects, sitting on a plane with atmosphere and ultimately atmospheric perspective surrounding it. An illusion of depth will ultimately be our goal because, after all, this is a flat surface. We have no choice but to create an illusion on this flat surface if we're trying to create a feeling of an environment that we could potentially move into, pick this object up, and it would experience the 3 dimensions, height, width, and depth. So here I'm creating an egg form, a derivative of a sphere, and you can see for my creature, my living organism, I have a reptilian creature emerging, but in your drawing, you're certainly welcome to put whatever kind of a character emerging from that egg as you wish. I would ask that all students in Intro to Art follow the background, foreground, and middle ground the same. Your freedom of choice will be the creature that you create, but you're certainly welcome to mirror my creation and attempt my creature as well. Now, as a rule, we're going to think about color theory. And cool colors recede from the human eye and are perceived by the human brain as to recede when compared to warm colors. So knowing that, I'm going to place my cool colors in the atmosphere in the background. So as a rule, and this is a good rule in painting when you're creating the depth of illusion, or the illusion of depth, is that cool colors can be used as a way to set apart the foreground and middle ground. So I'll take a cool blue, in this case I've got a Prussian blue, pretty strong blue, and I'm just going to hatch pretty evenly. And yes, like I've taught the students, I will reduce my pressure as I get to the horizon line here, and that helps with the illusion of depth later. And then as I come up next to the egg, I will cross hatch out. Again, you'll notice you'll still see the tooth, the texture of the paper, the white of the paper showing through. And we will obliterate that for a very painterly, smooth, even, intense colored effect in our final phase of the drawing. So right now you can think of it as blocking in colors. I'm going to use a clear, cool color for the background. I'm going to use a warm, muted, cream-like off-white and yellow for the middle ground. And for the foreground closest, we're going to be using dark browns, possibly reds. We'll have 3 distinct grounds of depth there that we'll build on. And again, I reminded the audience that we start in the background so that We can color over it. I mean, you'll notice I'll be coming to this edge, but if I make a mistake, like it goes in here like this, I bring some color into the object. Well, don't worry, I can color over it and then come up to that edge again. If I was doing this first and then I finished with the background and I brought that color in, I'd have a problem. So it's just practicality that we're starting, among other things, that we're starting on the background first. Always have a pencil sharpener handy. Coming up to this edge of this egg, I'm really paying attention here to where I reinstated the line. I reinstated the line here. And I'm leaving the mistakes behind. Ultimately, they will get blended out. In here, I'm actually going to bring a little bit of the blue because we're dealing with a broken egg fragment here. Wow, it sounds like the family's fighting downstairs or having a significant disagreement. We are a family after all. We are at home. Maybe the waste of food, perhaps. My daughter has a tendency to waste food. Not always. She's really good in so many ways, but she might leave a little bit of milk in her glass or something like that. And that always gives us a bit of a frustration. Perhaps that's why there's that little family conflict going on downstairs. I would encourage you to read the rubric, as I always do. The rubric gives guidance in terms of learning targets, objectives that are expected, the types of imagery we're dealing with, the ideas that we're covering. But also, we are finishing this creative year together in Intro to Art with a very clear relation to the national standards. And I place the national standard that I think this assignment is most connected to, and it involves revision. Been working up toward this idea. So many students have the idea that your teacher's giving you a task, you complete the task in your mind, and then you submit it. Now, as you progress in school, you'll find that that idea is insufficient. Learning is about collecting information, synthesizing that information through comparison with other information, coming to conclusions, comparing your conclusions with others, and then adjusting your schema, your understanding of things. So if you're constantly just thinking of school as, oh, I've got a task and I'm going to do it and then I'll move on to the next, you're missing something dramatically important, and that is revision. After all, we are, in this case, in a product-based class. So if you're in a cooking class, for example, and you're cooking a souffle, and you think that going through the process is good enough, well, you've got another thing coming. You've got something called the audience. You feed that souffle to the audience, and yeah, you can be one of those individuals that's like, well, I've tried, and I've done my best. I guess I'll never be a good cook because that souffle tastes like egg crap. Well, in this case, I'd like you to think of this final capstone project as something different. or similar as the case may be, I want you to think about my constructive criticism and improve on it. That's right. Take a photograph of your image, submit it, and I'll give you recommendations to meet the rubric. So there will be multiple opportunities to improve your score. There always have been. It's just that in this final exercise of the year, let's face it, I'm making it really clear and connecting it to the standards, something that we have always really done, and that is constructive criticism and revision. After all, I'm a teacher. This is not Pinterest. This is not just, hey, do this. Here's a quick example. We'll speed it up. And oh, wow, aren't I? That's amazing. I've done this thing. No. The expectation is you learn. And you're going to have feedback in real time from me when you submit that photograph. Now, I'm going to place this drawing tool down because it's time for me to flip my album. Yes, records, old school. So I've got this cool color laid out in the background. We're going to leave it like that for a while until we get a little bit more sophisticated with our techniques. Another thing that we learn, and is particularly true in watercolor, is layering. Starting with your lightest colors and then layering on them. It's no different here. I'm going to start with a very light, warm color. I'm thinking about some kind of a creamy yellow. I think a reduced intensity yellow for the egg.
Are you drawing for your kids?
I am, sweetheart. What's on your mind?
What's on my mind? You don't have to stop drawing, but my thing keeps freezing with Ari, and I think it might be because you're doing this.
It's not. I'm not communicating on the internet. I'm simply recording.
Okay.
Although I will cut off any connection to the internet whatsoever so that you don't experience streaming problems. But I am not streaming on the internet or communicating. I am recording. The troubles, the challenges of homebound learning, where you're lucky if you have more than one device. Luckier yet if you have a communication service that gives you several megabytes of information a second in upload and download capabilities. We're working on the internet after all. Through that communication platform. Just blocking in the color for now. We'll be getting a sense of roundedness in our final phases of this drawing. Mostly hatching in one direction here. Again, all of this will blend out with further treatment and time. Yes, art takes time. Visual creativity takes time, if you care. So far I've worked with 2 different colors. And believe it or not, to give complexity to this cast shadow that we have down here, I'm actually going to bring the colors that I've worked with in the background and the middle ground into the shadow. So it's going to make that shadow shimmer. Yeah, it's going to shimmer. It's going to have luminosity. Luma meaning light. It's going to reflect light differently than just a straight up black. Again, layering. We're adding complexity of visual interest to the cast shadow. You'll notice adding that yellow into that blue all makes that traditional combination that they talk about in elementary school. Yellow and blue. Yellow and blue make green. But we're going to make it a little bit more complicated than that. And interesting. In so doing. Well, I have 3 more spaces. 1, 2, 3. 3 more spaces to block in general color. I'm going to stick with this yellow for the shard of eggshell. And I have to decide, what am I going to do here? Well, I think I'm going to go with a red of some kind. So, for me, starting with a light red, light brown, or a pink for the creature. I'll build on that with all kinds of color combinations, but thinking of red as the base color, if you will. I think I'll leave the talons or claws alone so that I can make those canary yellow, bright yellow, poisonous like yellow. I'll leave the whites of the eyes. Not concerned with a little bit of blue in here because I will be bringing purple into the creature through the color combinations. And we know that red and blue in combinations make purples. And then this whole area here we're going to be dealing with brown. So probably going to be starting with a reddish brown, a terracotta or a sienna color. All right, so here we have the blocked out version of the drawing. And again, I'm going to emphasize how important it is to think foreground, middle ground, background. To that end, I'm going to start with my background first, blend colors until I have depth and evenness, and then I'm going to move to where the object sits on, these browns and cast shadows. Then I'll move into my object, which is I'm treating as my closest thing, my foreground, even though a little bit of this middle ground is closer. We're going to be paying most attention to this last when we deal with detail. So today, right now, I started with this Prussian blue. I think I'm going to work this space with three forms of blue, starting with my mid-tone Prussian, my ultramarine, which is my nice dark blue, and then like a cerulean cloud blue, a sky blue, to finish off and to bring down those light values to the horizon. So let's do it. I'm also thinking about direction of line. If I see an application of color, a hatching line in this direction, I will cross hatch it, and then ultimately I'll finish with scumbling and pressure. Starting with my darks at the tops. So I'm going to have most pressure at the top for now, and then moving down and applying my cerulean sky blue last. So it's a question of how much of this Prussian blue do I allow to show through while I apply the darker portions and lighter portions. Dark, mid-tone, light. Blending, layering. And I'll show you a technique for getting rid of the tooth, or at least the light parts of the paper. We already know that if we were to use some kind of a blending tool, like a colorless blender, we would effectively obliterate that problem. Also, there's another technique you can use, which is, look at that, nice, which is a solvent, like a mineral spirit or a turpentine. Since this is oil-based colored pencil, and colored pencils are usually oil-based or wax-based, it breaks down that binder that holds the pigment and blends it together. It's a nice technique that you do last. Keeping a sharp colored pencil is nice, even though we're covering large, expansive areas and we're breaking down that pencil. We want that sharp pencil edge so that we can bring it up close to the contour of uh, our creature, of our object, or the horizon line for that matter. right, young ones. Here we are. We've blocked in most of the color from background to middle ground to foreground. The object that's going to have the most detail. And we will be dealing with blending and detail next. So, this was part 2, phase 2 of your capstone project. I hope you're well. If you have any specific questions, please don't hesitate to ask on Google Classroom. Send me an email. Again, Mr. Hoon, making stuff with Mr. Hoon, signing off.